Hello, my name is Emily Ann Richter, and this is Birds, Reclaiming and Renaming. Throughout this presentation, there will be many photos, all taken by me unless otherwise noted. During this presentation, I will be pronouncing several words in Indigenous languages and in Latin. I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Birds are very important to me and something that I come in contact with in almost every single facet of my life. I am a birder, member of YOLO Audubon Society, wild bird rehabilitator, and soon an environmental toxicology research assistant at UC Davis working on projects regarding water bird well-being. Since birds are such a big part of my life, the ramifications of prejudice, especially against Indigenous people, that I see ringing throughout the world of birds saddens me. In my talk today, I will address the colonialism still present within the names of birds and related organisms and organizations. And then I will talk about how renaming can help start healing the wounds inflicted by white naturalists in the 18th and 19th centuries. First, I want to turn your attention to something that has been in our news recently. The Audubon Society of New York voted a few months ago to drop the name Audubon from their organization, and many other chapters of the nationwide organization, including our own, have followed suit or discussed doing so. In order to advocate for inclusivity and take a small steps towards healing the wounds left behind by colonialism, it is absolutely imperative that we drop the name Audubon as soon as possible. John James Audubon was a French-American painter and naturalist. He released a book in Europe called Birds of America that was based on his travels in North America in the early 1800s. However, John James Audubon was an abhorrent man. Many of his paintings that made him famous, specifically those of Falco Washingtoni and Seyornis Phoebe, were based off the works of other artists without any consent or citation. When he did paint from real-life bird specimens, he did not paint from observation, but instead from birds that he would kill, sometimes dozens for one painting. He also killed other types of animals and cruelly experimented on still others, including his own dog. But his lack of morals didn't stop there. In a time when many people were speaking out against slavery, Audubon was a vocal supporter of it, eventually becoming a slaveholder purely as a political statement. Finally, during his travels around North America, Audubon pillaged the graves of Indigenous people, looking for skills to send to physician and natural historian Dr. Samuel George Morton, who collected them in an attempt to rank different races based on intelligence, which he quantified using the size of the brain space in the skull. Despite John James Audubon's unprincipled and unethical behavior, recognized as unacceptable in the early 1800s and horrifying now, hundreds of local chapters of the largest and most influential bird organization, including Yolo County's own chapter, are still named after him. Removing his name from the organization and refusing to honor someone proudly exhibiting white supremacist ideals is a very necessary step towards healing the hurt that white naturalists like him have caused millions of people, particularly Black and Indigenous individuals, helping to make bird-related activities more inclusive for those who aren't white. But removing the name Audubon is just the beginning of the steps we need to take. Many birds carry common names or scientific names that were given to them during Audubon's time by colonists. Sometimes these names were given by naturalists in honor of themselves or their friends. We call these honorific names. Many times, these honored individuals exhibited extreme racism. Every time we use these honorific names, we are, even if we do not intend to, perpetrating the racism of these individuals by insinuating that people with their lack of morals deserve to be honored. I will go through 3 examples of honorific naming, although this only represents a small fraction of honorifically bird species. First, we have Audubon's warbler, which is a subspecies of Cetophasia coronata, also known as the yellow-rumped warbler, and, of course, named for John James Audubon, who we all know is a very problematic character. However, if we want to rename this bird, we must do so with specific intentions. One way would be to name the subspecies based on its range. Since this subspecies is one that lives in Western North America, we could rename it to Western Yellow-Rumped Warbler, an accurate name that no longer honors a white supremacist. Next, we have the Townsend's warbler, named for John Kirk Townsend. Townsend was an American naturalist who, alongside Audubon, collected the skulls of Indigenous people for Dr. Morton. He was also involved in an Oregonian court case that resulted in the acquittal of a man named Thomas Hubbard, who murdered an Indigenous girl. It is inappropriate to honor someone who has caused so much pain to indigenous people by naming a bird after him. Whoops. This bird, the townsman's warbler. Instead, I propose the name yellow-black striped warbler, which acts as a nod to the unique and characteristic appearance of this beautiful bird. Finally, we have the Swainson's hawk. Many people know William John Swainson as a world-traveling naturalist. However, many people do not know that Swainson later settled in New Zealand, where he quickly became a leading officer in the war against Maori, killing many members of the indigenous group of New Zealand and forcing still others out of their homelands. Since this hawk is a defining staple of grasslands, I propose that we rename this bird the grasslands hawk, instead of continuing to honor a proponent of the killing and forced removal of indigenous people. When it comes to renaming birds, there's also the option of restoring their names to what they were before colonization. Sorry. Here are 3 birds pictured along their names in Kwahila, a language used by some indigenous people of Southern California. The Anna's hummingbird is known as the tucho, the American robin is known as the yachi, and the red-tailed hawk is known as the ka'a. While this form of renaming has the potential to do much good, one difficulty with renaming birds in this way is that many bird species may be named in several different languages. So for species that have several indigenous names, my opinion is that the best renaming practice is renaming based on appearance, range, habitat, or other defining characteristics. Birds, as well as bats, have been renamed before. The dark-eyed junco was once called the Oregon junco, but when it was taxonomically consolidated, the name was changed to one that made more sense. A similar thing was done with the California scrub jay, which was renamed when the species was taxonomically recategorized, and it no longer made sense to call the bird a western scrub jay when it primarily had its range restricted to California. I would argue that it no longer makes sense to name birds after people who have caused so much harm to non-white individuals. Finally, around 2010, a new species of bat was discovered in St. Vincent and honorifically named Micronectaris guarafuni for Guarafuna, the indigenous people in the area. However, within the context of Guarafuna culture, this was an offensive action. The scientists quickly recognized the error of their ways and renamed the bat Micronectaris bariri, bariri meaning being the Garifuna word for bat. All of these examples of renaming after the realization that the old names no longer serve their purpose are good examples of what we need to do with the honorific names given to some species of birds. Removing the name Audubon from our organization is just the beginning. In order to truly become the inclusive and nature-focused group that we should strive to be, our organization needs to advocate for the renaming of honorifically named birds. This will act as a small step towards repairing the harm done by white naturalists to non-white individuals, specifically indigenous people. Yellow Audubon Society has the opportunity to spur a tidal wave of social good. It is time to take flight and rise to the challenge. Thank you. Here are my credits and references for this presentation. I would like to thank the Sacramento Audubon and the New York City Audubon, the Smithsonian, the National Audubon Society, the paper Audubon's A Bird of Washington, the blogger Matthew R. Halley, and the Oregon Historical Society, as well as the New Zealand National Geographic, the California State Audubon Society, the paper From Micronectaris guarafuna to Micronectaris bariri. And I would like to thank Bird Names for Birds for inspiring this presentation and Slides Carnival for providing this slideshow template. And I would like to thank you for listening. Thank you.